Maybe let's just start with the newsiest bits, which is that the OPEC Plus are meeting this weekend. It's going to be a virtual meeting on Sunday. I haven't seen any analyst who expects there to be a change in the production or for them to reevaluate how much production they're looking to take off the market. Is it your expectations that they just extend these voluntary cuts until the end of the year?
I think that's the most likely outcome. I'm obviously very sad not to be able to take a nice trip to Vienna in June, but I think the ministers having their meeting on Sunday, of course, when the markets are closed, will essentially look at the current market and they can see that in the second half of 2024, notwithstanding the worries perhaps about Chinese demand that you alluded to a second ago, they will see in the second half demand higher than it was in the first half of the year. And if that does materialize, they'll also see that at the same time, the growth in supply from non-OPEC producers will be less than that increase in demand, which gives them the scope to see a tighter market and possibly prices rising a little higher. So I think they'll look at the market, they'll think that prices aren't as high as we would like, but they're as good as they're likely to get in this short term.
Let's talk about the intra-country dynamics within OPEC, because it's all very fine and well for them to come out with these voluntary cuts or their targets, but actually compliance has been quite low. You see the likes of Iraq overproducing, Russia, obviously part of OPEC Plus, still producing more than their quota, UAE pushing to be allowed to produce more. How are all of those intra-country dynamics going to be resolved over the course of this weekend?
Well, I don't think they are going to be resolved, to be frank, simply because we're in this holding pattern at the moment where prices are pretty stable. There are a lot of issues you mentioned, for example, overproduction. That varies between 500,000 to 800,000 barrels a day, depending on whose numbers you look at. Of course, we're in a situation where we have formal quotas, but also these voluntary cuts. And of course, the picture is very, very complicated for analysts to follow. But the point is that there are countries such as Iraq and the UAE in the Middle East region who are both seeing their production capacity grow over time. The UAE has already managed to gain an increase in the basis on which its quota is drawn. And these pressures will continue, but they are not going to be addressed significantly at the meeting this weekend. It becomes very different when we reach the end of the year and we're looking into 2025 with, again, a year which may see strong growth in competitor production from the non-OPEC countries. So these issues of quota levels can't be put off forever, but I don't think they're going to be addressed significantly this weekend.
Neil, I don't know if this is a controversial thing to say, but it seems to me going forwards that it is not OPEC supply growth which is going to determine where the net change in supply is coming from. The big swing factor has been over the last couple of years and will continue to be the production that's coming out of North America. So to what extent do you think is that going to put a dampener on whatever the OPEC decide to do?
Well, it's always a factor because there's nothing the OPEC producers can do about the production trends that we're likely to see from Brazil and Canada, the United States, Norway to some extent, and of course Guyana, which is a new producer and which is growing very strongly. And OPEC is just going to have to accept that certainly for the next few years, although oil demand is likely to grow fairly steadily, I'm certainly not a peak demand advocate, they are going to have to accept that other producers are going to be taking a significant share of the growing market, and they're just going to have to suck it up. And this is the world in which they're going to have to live. And for the producers that want a higher price, we're always told that closer to $100 a barrel would be their sweet spot. Well, I think they're just going to have to accept that that is not likely in the near future and just live with the situation we're in and maintain the discipline or better discipline with respect to their own quota, their own quota levels.
Well, I'm not going to let you go without asking you if you do have a price target for oil over the next 6 months, given all of the things that you articulated now, OPEC, what they're likely to do, the non-OPEC supply that's coming to the market, and the reasonable demand picture that's emerging?
Yes, a reasonable demand picture, non-OPEC production coming to the market. I think unless there is a major shock, and I think we've essentially now eliminated any kind of price premium from geopolitics. I think the Brent price is going to hover somewhere around the mid-80s towards the upper 80s if demand is stronger in the second half of the year. But I don't think you're likely to see any excitement much higher than that. So mid to high 80s, and that's about as good as it's going to get.